when my grandfather met a demon. My mom has been telling me and my siblings this story for years now, and every time she tells the story it always gives me the chills. My mom was extremely young at the time, considering this was somewhere in the 80s, and my mom was probably around 7 to 10, though I'm not sure, and she was living in Harris County, Texas at the time, and her father, my grandpa, was retired Special Forces. And they were living in a neighborhood next to this house, and my mom would play in the front yard with her brother, my uncle. And she would always see this man sitting in a rocking chair on his front porch, and he would just do that every day. So my mum's father decides one day to go talk to the man and try to get to know him. So he goes out of the house and over to the man's porch, introduces himself and sits down with him. They start chatting away, but then the man tells my mum's father that he wants to show him something. Though he's a little hesitant, he accepts, and so they walk into the man's house and into the basement. But my mum's father noticed how the house looked abandoned and run down. He didn't really mind it, so they continue down into the basement. In the middle of the room is a table with a plate in the center with chicken legs on it. The man tells him to sit, and they both start eating. After a few minutes, they get done and put the legs on the plate. But then the man says, "Do you want to see something cool?" My mum's father is hesitant, but again he accepts. Then the man begins to put his hand over the plate and starts waving it around. The bones start to levitate and almost dance. The man said, "If you want this power, you must sell your soul to the devil." And as soon as my mum's dad heard that, he ran as fast as he could and out of the house. After that day, the man disappeared. So my mum's father decided to investigate. He went back to the basement and found a pentagram engraved on the floor, but the house was completely abandoned. He asked the neighbors if anyone had lived there, but they all said that no one was living there and that it had been abandoned for years. After that, my mum's father never stepped foot near the house again. Around 8 years ago, I studied at a language school in Dublin, Ireland. We were there for 2 weeks, and one day we went on a trip to a nearby fishing town. Sadly, I don't remember the name. It was the weekend and probably a local holiday because the streets were packed and some festival was underway. We arrived with the group, had a brief tour around town, and then got some free time. My friends and I decided to walk around the city centre and check out a few shops. There were 4 of us: me, my best friend Miles, his sister Mary, and our mutual friend Anne. We decided to split into pairs so the guys could do guy stuff and the girls could do their own thing. Miles and I had a good time exploring. We grabbed something to eat, ran into some friends from the bus, bought some souvenirs, and before we knew it, it was time to head back. We had agreed to meet in front of a tea shop or cafe. I don't remember exactly, but it had a beautiful light blue facade that really stood out, so we chose it as our meeting point. As we were approaching the cafe, we realized we were on the opposite side of the street and needed to cross. At that moment, Anne called me and asked where we were at. I told her we just had to cross the street and would be right there. She said she was already waiting and Mary was inside paying for something at the counter. At that moment, Anne called me and asked where we were at. I told her we just had to cross the street and would be right there. She said she was already waiting and Mary was inside paying for something at the counter. I saw Anne. We waved at each other across the street and I hung up. The sidewalk was really narrow. There was a bus stop in front of us and a bunch of people were getting off, so the crowd was pretty dense. The nearest crosswalk was just past the bus stop, but Miles and I looked at each other and decided to make a detour through an alley on our right and try to go around the crowd. As we came out of the alley, we noticed that there were way fewer people on the street than before. I wouldn't say we felt uneasy or that the streets were suddenly empty, nothing dramatic like that, but it was noticeably quieter, just enough to feel a bit off. We figured the bus had picked up a bunch of people and left. We crossed the street and I immediately noticed that Anne wasn't in front of the cafe anymore. I pulled out my phone to call her, but I had no signal. Miles checked his. Same thing. We didn't think too much about it and went inside the shop to look for them, but it was empty except for the cashier. We asked if Mary had just been there, and the cashier said we were the first people to come inside in a while. We walked up and down the street, but the girls were nowhere to be found. At first, I thought they had run off somewhere or were just messing with us, but that seemed less likely by the second, because we were supposed to meet 20 minutes before our bus left. Miles and I looked at each other and realized we had no idea what was going on. We had already wasted a good 10 minutes looking for them, so we needed to head to the bus as soon as possible. Half joking, I suggested that we backtrack and go through the alley again, and Miles immediately agreed, like he was thinking the same thing. Miles and I looked at each other and realized we had no idea what was going on. We had already wasted a good 10 minutes looking for them, so we needed to head to the bus as soon as possible. Half joking, I suggested that we backtrack and go through the alley again, and Miles immediately agreed, like he was thinking the same thing. We rushed back, crossed the street, went through the alley again, and ended up right where Anne had called me the first time. I checked my phone, and this time there was signal, so I called Anne back and asked where they were. She answered right away and said nothing had changed since our last conversation. She was still standing in front of the shop, and Mary was still inside paying. The crowd at the bus stop was back. Miles and I squeezed through, crossed the street, and sure enough, Anne was standing right there like before. A moment later, Mary walked out of the shop. They greeted us casually, then noticed we looked a bit puzzled. Immediately, we both joked that we had just gone through a time loop. On the way back to Dublin, I checked the call times. The 2 calls to Anne were 2 minutes apart. I didn't even show Miles because I knew he wouldn't be surprised at all. Neither of us knows what that was, and we never really talked about it again. The crowd at the bus stop was back. Miles and I squeezed through, crossed the street, and sure enough, Anne was standing right there like before. A moment later, Mary walked out of the shop. They greeted us casually, then noticed we looked a bit puzzled. Immediately, we both joked that we had just gone through a time loop. On the way back to Dublin, I checked the call times. The 2 calls to Anne were 2 minutes apart. I didn't even show Miles because I knew he wouldn't be surprised at all. Neither of us knows what that was, and we never really talked about it again. Just had my first nightmare about Freddy Krueger. I just had this dream about 45 minutes ago, and I just wanted to share it. I haven't thought about a nightmare on Elm Street in a while, but somehow Freddy found his way into my sleep. It started with me wandering through a neighborhood, trying to find my way somewhere. I was outside weaving through different apartment buildings when I suddenly noticed a window with its lights on. The glow caught my attention, and then I heard something strange. The audio from the original Nightmare on Elm Street movie playing from inside. I think it was from the scene where the boyfriend character gets attacked in his jail cell in his nightmare. I remember thinking it was odd, but the dream kept going. Next thing I knew, I was no longer in that neighborhood. I was watching a brand new Nightmare on Elm Street movie. It felt like it had just come out, and Robert Englund was back as Freddy. It was completely unfamiliar, as if I were watching it for the first time. Then, without warning, I woke up in my room. But something was wrong. Everything had a reddish tinge, like a filter was over reality. I tried to move. Nothing. I was paralyzed. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw my door was open. Freddy walked in. He didn't attack right away. He just loomed there, watching me, messing with me. I kept struggling to move, to break free, but I was completely stuck in my bed. Suddenly, he disappeared, but I could still feel something in the room, like I was being watched. I focused all my energy on trying to wake up. I managed to shift my body slightly toward my lamp. If I could just turn it on, maybe I'd snap out of it. But as I reached for it, Freddy reappeared, laughing, pointing at me. He shoved me back down onto the bed. Then he was gone again. I tried once more to grab my lamp. This time I succeeded. But when I flipped the switch, nothing happened. No light. And worse, I realized I had no feeling in my fingers. My arm was completely numb, like it didn't even belong to me. The lamp slipped from my grasp and fell onto the bed. I looked to my right. Freddy was standing over me. He struck me, but I felt nothing. It was just a jump scare, like my mind was trying to push me awake. Still, I couldn't move. I turned my gaze back toward my door. In real life, I have a sweater hanging behind it, just slightly visible from my bed. But in my dream, Freddy was peeking out from behind the door, staring right at me. As soon as I noticed him, he lunged. Then he lunged again. The second time, I instinctively threw up my arms, and that's when I finally woke up for real. Heart racing, I immediately turned on my lamp. This time, the light worked. I sat there, still trying to process everything.